Welcome, everybody. Becca, I actually think this may only be like my second member call that I've been a participant in. I've looked through the names of folks here, and I think I know probably 70-some% of the people involved. But for those that I haven't met, my name's Daniel Beveridge. I'm with the Colorado State Forest Service. I'm the Fire Fuels and Watershed Manager for the agency, and I'm excited to be here and to be able to introduce our four wildfire resilience coordinators. Again, the nature of the positions, then I'll introduce them really quickly when I conclude. But these positions were intended to be a supplement to the traditional Colorado State Forest Service field presence, right? Back in 2012, when the agency reorganized, some of us lived through that. Others, have come around afterwards. But when we transitioned from districts to field offices and so on, we maintained a fairly continuous suite of resources and services. But, since the State Forest Service maintained that mitigation presence, that's been a good thing in a lot of ways. But I mean, the way that this world has grown of years just recently, there's been a lot of immense changes. So we felt a need and had a fortunate opportunity with additional funding to be able to bring on these folks who really specialize in wildfire resilience matters on behalf of the State Forest Service. So yeah, there's been an era of necessary transition is one of the notes that I put in, right? I mean, our embrace of a lot of these social matters that commonly were neglected when it came to this kind of work, there's no longer this appropriate messaging of we can only create defensible space. The river is much deeper than that. So that's one of the reasons why these positions are around, is to really help do that more so in a very direct fashion. They also will be providing a valuable internal networking resource that was not previously available, right? Because our supervisory foresters and our foresters, they have a lot of work to do already as it is, and they were providing this huge suite of services to their respective field offices and areas, and wildfire mitigation was just one of those things. So in this time and age, we just felt it necessary to really kind of level up in a way, if you will. So this new staff of ours is here to help us and our network level up. So these really are strategic roles in many ways, expected to incorporate and synthesize learning from their respective areas, right? To advocate for State Forest Service interests and areas of responsibility and duty, really, what we're tasked to do with as an agency, but also to really integrate into the network and support proactive learning both directions, upwards to our state office programmatic personnel, and then downwards to all of the folks that they will be working with in partnership and collaboration. One of the things that I am excited about, I see that Chuck Altlater is here with DFPC, and as the community resilience, I'm going to mess up the name, apologies, Chuck, but when your folks come in, I really hope that they can get integrated very closely with our WRCs. I see that Jimmy White is on the call as well. And one of the other things that I'm really looking forward to is when we can get the U.S. Forest Service folks that are working on each of the local units, addressing wildfire risk reduction work, that we can get those folks tied in as well, because we all recognize and appreciate the necessity and the value of having standardized messaging and commonality with that type of thing. So with all of us, with state and federal organizations speaking the same kind of message, we're really looking forward to that so that we can work in partnership with local folks to do the exact same thing. And we're really thankful, again, I will say, Becca, to you directly and to the group here as a whole, that we're thankful and appreciative to have FACO here as a network to provide that connecting service in many ways. It's really, really a valuable thing. A few really simple examples, CWPPs. Okay, folks, like we all understand that these are a pretty big deal, and that is not changing, right? Like the stars rising, you might say, for CWPPs, and there's a significant amount of work happening around these planning resources and tools. And our WRCs are going to be very strongly integrated into those efforts across their areas, but then also providing that connection as well on behalf of the agency and otherwise, to link up lessons learned and fantastic failures, if you will, with CWPPs from the past so that we can move forward in a common fashion. Firewise USA is another example, right? And there are still a number of recognized sites that are working off of their kind of archived older risk assessments. In order for those sites to be able to maintain their recognition, we're going to have to update those risk assessments. Otherwise, they won't maintain their recognition. So that's some of the work that they'll be able to support in the short term. Further, the Colorado State Forest Service did take on comprehensive management of the Community Wildfire Defense Grant Program. So these WRCs that I'm preparing to introduce will be providing some of that area support for that purpose, answering questions, providing reviews of applications, other things of that nature. I'm really excited that these folks are on because they do bring a very broad and diverse set of experiences and skills to represent the agency. A short list is operational wildfire experience with wildland fire modules, grant application and management at a variety of scales and levels, emergency management experience and exposure, ecological restoration, nonprofit establishment and management, and deep interest in social science concepts. So there's a lot to carry over and convey. I hope you can get the spirit of my excitement to be able to introduce these people, because I really am jazzed. Those of you that have known me for a little while are not probably very surprised by this, but I am pleased to introduce in our Northeast area, Janae Malpas; in our Southeast area, Paul Branson; in our Southwest area, Todd Lobsky; and in our Northwest area, Chaz Lakin. I am 1 minute over the allotted time you gave me, Becca. So I don't know that it's appropriate to answer questions. I think that we can kind of sweep all that up into our area breakouts, but it'd probably be best for me to turn it over to you to introduce us to what comes next.
Thank you, Daniel. That's great. And yeah, we'll hold up, and we are going to do breakouts by those regions. So people will have to self-select. So it's on Paul and Janae and Todd and Chaz to do a good job of putting yourselves in the right quadrant of the state, and then other folks can come to you to share what's happening in those areas of the state. But first, before we got a couple other things before that. So we just have a few minutes. If folks have other updates that they would like to share about what's happening with positions, what's happening with grant opportunities, recent success stories from your area, training that's coming up, new partnerships in your area. What do you got going on for wildfire resilience you want to share? Go ahead, Chuck.
All right. Like Dan alluded to, we are kind of going through the process now of writing the rules for the Wildfire Resilient Homes Grant that was created by the legislature this year. So more coming on that, but we are going through that process. Real quick, we are hiring 4 CRR specialists across the state, 1 in each quadrant. 1 will be in the Southwest, and that'll sort of be Telluride South, and 1 will be in the Northwest from that Telluride North area. And then we'll have 2 on the Eastern Plains as well. And those positions are coming up in the next couple of weeks. You should see them hitting. And these really are folks that are going to be heavily involved in wildfire matters, but they're also going to be doing some ancillary things, because to say if we keep people in their homes, the better we are at preventing wildfires as well. And to that point, we are hosting a youth fire setting intervention class in Durango, September 19th through the 21st. It's open to any agencies that want to send someone to learn about doing youth fire setting intervention. And if you're interested, go ahead and contact me.
Thank you, Chuck. Brendan, I see you coming on camera. You have an update?
No, I was just reminded that I missed yet another calendar invite. I mean, my fault. It's been a busy, crazy day. Are we doing updates?
Just if you have anything special to share, any progress on hiring a mitigation specialist there?
Yeah, we're through all the processes. We'll be onboarding shortly as
Cool.
They land the plan on a couple of outstanding projects of their own, and it'll be exciting. So, and we have 3 engines out the door, so assisting wildfires across the nation. So,
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Maria?
I don't know why I can't find the hand raising feature. For those that don't know me, I'm Maria Brandt. I'm the Outreach and Development Director with Coalitions and Collaboratives. I want to congratulate Steve and Laura and everyone else that's new on the call too. I think that's awesome. I just wanted to announce that Coco is hiring a position for a program, the Community Navigator. The Community Navigator program. We're hiring a director. So if you want to go over to coco.org, it's a director position that's being putting a new program in to advance wildfire mitigation efforts and strengthen community resiliency, specifically to communities without those resources. So that position is out. And then also Coco is working with a whole bunch of other partners to host what we will hope will move forward kind of as like a Southern Colorado Fireshed. So that meeting is being held in Golden tomorrow, if anyone is interested. And that's it.
Yeah, you can also drop the job info in the chat, but also I know there's a virtual community wildfire mitigation best practices starting on September 11th. That's that 8-week course. So that would be, I think there's a little bit of space left in that if people are interested in getting into that course. Okay.
Also, I forgot, well, Becca is also hosting the CWMBP also at the Sustaining Colorado Wildfire or Watersheds Conference. So you don't have to register for the conference in order to attend that class too, if you would like to attend that one in person in Avon.
Thanks, Maria. I should have had that on my list, but you're right. There's plenty of room in that 2-day as well. Okay. Well, without further ado, if you have more updates, we'll get to them later. But I have seen the PowerPoint slides from a similar presentation to what Aaron Green is going to share with us today and thought this is some really good stuff. I heard it was really good stuff. And it was kind of to an isolated group the last time that I saw the PowerPoints come through. So I thought we'd invite Aaron to come and share statewide some more about the programs that are available through the State Forest Service. Aaron Green's the Associate Director of Forestry Services for the Colorado State Forest Service. And I'll let you work on sharing your screen and take it from there.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. So again, Aaron Green. I'm the Associate Director of Forestry Services for the Colorado State Forest Service. That just means that I've got the opportunity and the responsibility of managing what we're doing out of all 17 of our field offices across the state and our one satellite office. So all of those foresters on the ground. So I'll go ahead and start with my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them at the end. But here we go. So the first thing to kind of recognize here is that we're in a period of uniqueness in that there are these historic levels of investment from both the federal government and the state in a lot of the work that is really important to us in wildfire mitigation and preparing our communities to be able to be fire adapted. The funds in the federal government are really concentrated in two particular bills, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Those two bills, I'll cover some of those funding opportunities inside of those, but really change the game when it comes to how a lot of these programs that we often find ourselves applying to and working with to get some of the work done that we need to do to protect Colorado's forests, watersheds, and communities are really getting funded. And then I just want to recognize that the state legislature has also made historic investment in our furworm program, in our co-swap program, which I know many of you are using, investments in our Colorado State Forest Service nursery, and then investments in our Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities Fund. And recently this year, Governor Polis and the legislature put over $2 million into G&A staffing for the Colorado State Forest Service so that we can focus on doing some of that work across boundaries with our partners in the Forest Service and the BLM. Some of these agreements that you may have been aware of in the bipartisan infrastructure law have really plussed up some nonprofits, some of the larger nationwide nonprofits, and what they're calling these keystone agreements. Lots of money is going to a lot of our friends and partners at the National Forest Foundation, National Wild Turkey Federation, Rocky Mountain Elk, Trout Unlimited, Mule Deer Foundation are all getting large plus ups in money as they figure out how to engage with some of these funds in our landscapes. And then I also want to recognize Colorado is in a unique situation of being a substantial headwater state, right? 17 other states in one country get their drinking water from water that originates here in Colorado. And for the first time, the Colorado State Forest Service has been approached by other states, including Nevada, New Mexico, and now Arizona, looking to potentially fund forest treatment projects in order to protect watersheds, secure the water supply that runs through their state, which is kind of a unique situation that other states are interested in investing because they're receiving some of those ecosystem benefits from Colorado. So it's an exciting time and lots of stuff to kind of figure out in how we're matching and figuring out how to get this money to the ground as best as possible. The problem is that the problem is really large, right? Our forest action plan identified that it would take $4.2 billion to treat the top 10% of the state's most critical watersheds. That treatment cost was based on an average cost per acre of $1,800. That was the best funding numbers that we had available to us when we were writing the forest action plan in 2019. But since then, we've seen treatment costs continue to rise. I would feel lucky if we were able to get $1,800 an acre in just about any landscape in Colorado. And far more likely and far more often, we're seeing some treatment costs exceeding $4,000 per acre. We've gone through a period of time where for decades and perhaps even longer, that money was the primary limiting factor in our ability to get stuff done. But I think as this money through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, these keystone agreements and the investment by the state come through, we're going to start seeing other things be limiting factors in our ability to get good projects done effectively. Contract capacity is certainly an issue that we continue to monitor. We really hope that agreements and contracts signed in the past will not be defaulted on as we see these cost per acre projects continue to rise as more money gets put into the system. We're also seeing a significant constraint related to forester capacity, just the people on the ground, the boots on the ground to be able to do the work to get these projects implemented in a true and appropriate, using the best science available type of methodology. Contract capacity, interest rates are just starting to come down, but when interest rates were closer to 9%, the ability of some of our folks to get loans to start a new side to their business, to buy a new feller buncher, to buy a new skidder was really high. A reminder that we do have a small loan guarantee program through one of our programs at the Colorado State Forest Service. If you know of a contractor who's looking for some assistance, please point them in our direction. We'd be happy to help them find some low interest loans to be able to get into the game a little bit or to purchase some equipment. But the forestry capacity one is the one that we're really focusing on here at the Colorado State Forest Service. The shared stewardship plan that we've kind of initiated with the U.S. Forest Service in coordination with the Department of Natural Resources has really focused on an idea of surging into hiring folks to be able to move out on some of these projects. The CSFS, Colorado State Forest Service, has hired 7 support positions and 7 implementers. But through an agreement with Region 2 of the U.S. Forest Service, we've added an additional 11 implementation positions across the state. And in the past year, we've hired 10 lead foresters, 2 brand new supervisory foresters in locations that have not had supervisory foresters in the past. We've added 15 new foresters all within the past year since January, and we are opening up a new field office in Rifle to better engage with our communities along the White River in places like Glenwood Springs and even up into Moffat County and Meeker. So we continue to hire. We've also focused on the idea that we're not just focusing these hiring efforts in the Colorado State Forest Service's efforts in one location, but we're trying to spread those resources out across the state. There is some emphasis in some of the statewide priority areas that have been collaboratively determined, like the RMRI areas, but that doesn't keep us from putting positions in Granby and Steamboat and Alamosa and some of those other communities where we know there's a need to do some of this work. We also, as a part of this strike team or part of this shared stewardship surge with Region 2 of the Forest Service, have invested in a student strike team where there's 2 permanent CSFS employees and a group of 4 student interns that helps the Forest Service prep projects, mostly in the Front Range priority landscape, that 10-year priority landscape. They completed their very first season this year and were really successful in helping the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest get some good projects prepped for upcoming implementation. And then I just want to recognize that in that governor's 2023 budget, it included funding for the Colorado State Forest Service and was signed into law to provide us an extra $2 million for some additional capacity for foresters in other parts of the state. But we still have a lot of need, and we know that it's going to take more, and we know that other people are hiring across the state, and we're really moving into a mindset within the Colorado State Forest Service that we're not in competition with anybody, but it's our responsibility to see what we can do to kind of raise all of the boats in the harbor and what we can do associated with that. One of the major initiatives that we started this year was an emphasis on our internship program. Our internship program in the past would have 7 or 8 college students from CSU with this process, but this year we had 18 interns. A lot of that was funding from our federal partners in Region 2, which we really appreciate. They're contributing to this effort. Some of it was from Colorado State University and Dean Aguirre at the Warner College of Natural Resources, and a lot of it was internal funding through the Colorado State Forest Service to help promote this next generation of people who would be implementers in our landscapes to get some of this good work done. We've also, for the first time, initiated a fairly unique authority. We are the only unit within the Colorado State University that I'm aware of that has the opportunity to hire automatically, non-competitively, from our pool of interns. Once they get their 4-year degree, we will be offering 2 to 5 of our 18 interns this year permanent employment with the Colorado State Forest Service. So they will make that transition, finish off their education at CSU, and immediately come into an entry-level job at the Colorado State Forest Service to start working in some of our communities. We're also doing something fairly unique by leveraging our connection with Front Range Community College, which has locations in Boulder Valley, Longmont, and Fort Collins. They have a 2-year SAF, Society of American Foresters accredited program. For the first time, we've gotten the ability to hire some of these individuals into the Colorado State Forest Service and to give them the full benefits associated with being a CSU employee. We've made offers to 2 individuals, and they'll be joining our team shortly. They'll be working half-time in our Fort Collins office and our Boulder office, and will receive the educational benefits associated with being a CSU employee, which includes a brand new laptop, which can be used for educational as well as work purposes, but also 50% off tuition and 5 credits for free while they're employed at 20 hours a week working out of those Boulder and Fort Collins field offices. This is kind of a really big deal, but helps make that transition between those folks in the community college into CSU to help them become the foresters that we need, the next generation of foresters that we need to help our landscapes here in Colorado. Go really quickly into the bipartisan infrastructure funding. $5.5 billion was allocated to the U.S. Forest Service. It really identified priority landscapes in the 10-year strategy. The Colorado Front Range was one of those first landscapes that was identified. It also provided funding for the states to implement their forest action plans, which was kind of unique. Before then, the Forest Action Plan was kind of an unfunded mandate by state private tribal forestry, but now there's actually some funding into making those things that we identified in that plan work. There was substantial funding related to Good Neighbor Authority that is being passed along to the different Forest Service units, ranger districts that can be used to start some of these programs. And as Dan Beveridge mentioned, the Community Wildfire Defense Grant, over $1 billion was put into that. Its focus is CWPP and related to the cohesive strategy, which obviously includes fire adaptation. The first round of this was very competitive, but those applications for this next round are due this year on October 31st. And we're happy to hear that we have some wildfire resilience coordinators to help you figure out how to get and be successful with those applications moving forward. I also would say that inside of the bipartisan infrastructure law was new permanent funding and the establishment of this Joint Chiefs grant programming. Before, this was kind of an opportunity to use and to allocate some leftover funding, but now it is made more official. Eligible projects reduce the risk of wildfire, protect water quality and supply, or improve wildlife habitat for at-risk species. It's important to know that it can do either one of those three things. It doesn't have to manage all three of them at the same time. In 2013, or 2023, I'm sorry, they funded over $48.6 million across 14 projects. The funding is usually in the range of about $1.5 million per year and is really coordinated with funding sources available through the NRCS, the U.S. Forest Service, and state, private, and tribal forestry programming. The IRA funding is another bill that was passed that provided substantial amounts of funding to do mitigation work and to help establish fire-adapted communities. It included over $21 billion to the NRCS. It more than doubled the statewide funding for NRCS here in Colorado. And there was a huge emphasis on climate smart and underserved and underrepresented communities associated with this funding. $1.5 billion available within the Inflation Reduction Act that really focused on underserved and underrepresented communities, but also urban and community forestry grants. We're moving out in a big way to take advantage with a lot of our partners in figuring out how to best utilize those grants here in Colorado. And it included $1.8 billion to the U.S. Forest Service for treatments in the wildland-urban interface, although the IRA portion of this funding is really specific to only being on U.S. Forest Service lands. It gave an additional $100 million for efforts related to NEPA, as well as $50 million for old growth protection. One of the things to be aware of as a partner in Colorado and a partner involved in this type of work is that the Inflation Reduction Act had huge increases in the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. Chaffey County is currently implementing one of these projects where they received $5 million. They had $5 million to match that, and they're probably going to get, or they're at least trying to get, have a good success, doing well, getting something like $10.2 million in the ground to really focus on the treatment of private property using their priority system. The funding in this RCPP programming is for private land, and match is involved. But when you look at the 2023 funding levels and see where it's going in 2026, it's a huge increase in this programming from $250 million to $2.4 billion. And remember, this is 5-year money, so it gives you a long time to figure out how to best implement that money on the landscape. Mention really quickly, co-swap, our friends at DNR through Senate Bill 21-258 got the ability to prioritize projects with the greatest potential to protect life, property, and infrastructure with some of this statewide funding. In the last legislative session, co-swap became a permanently funded program. It is tied to severance tax, so that funding level goes up or down, but is an amazing placeholder for future investment in this type of work. Received an email late Friday night about the 2023 release for requests for proposals. That should be occurring in the next week, or at least at the end of August is what the email said. These workforce development grants are available across the entire state and can be used to do implementation on projects on all ownerships, including federal. But there is another section of the grants that needs to be focused on the areas identified in the map on the screen. The guidance that came out late Friday indicated that there will be additional training opportunities and additional optional cash grants for project management expenses that will be new to the co-swap program in 2023. That information should, as I said, be coming out relatively soon. Our furworm grant, or our forest restoration wildfire risk mitigation program, received a lot of additional funding for fiscal 2023, and we tried to get about $15 million out in those grants. But importantly, in 2022, the funding was stabilized. That funding level hovers right around that $8 million a year mark. These are 50-50 match grants that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but can be 25-75% match for communities with fewer resources. Capacity building projects are limited to 25% of the available funding, and this year that will be $1.8 million. Applications are now open. I encourage you to work with your local Colorado State Forest Service office to look at those opportunities, or connect with some of our wildfire resilience coordinators, as those applications are due October 18th. The emphasis of projects for these furworm grants are priority areas in the 2020 Forest Action Plan, CWPPs, protection of water supplies, cross-boundary work, use of youth or veteran corp organizations in the implementation of your project. But those aren't requirements, just emphasis. We also had last year the wildfire mitigation incentives for local governments. This was one-time funding with the dedicated revenue for forest management and wildfire mitigation projects that promoted thinning, fuel breaks, wildfire mitigation, outreach, and education directed at property owners. And there was some flexibility for other forestry and mitigation efforts. We awarded over $9.5 million of funding through that wildfire mitigation incentives for local governments grant program, and that was matched by $8.6 million to be more than $18 million of additional funding, with the idea that if you have some capacity and you are working programs to bring in resources, that there should be an additional reward for doing that. Capacity begets capacity is kind of some of the idea behind that. Wanted to make you aware of some other grant opportunities that I'm sure some of you are familiar with, but just putting it out there, our Western Wildland Urban Interface grants, up to $300,000 of 50-50 match money opens in October. Dates to come out specifically soon, and will close sometime in January of 2024. We also have our CAFA, our Community Assistance Funds grant. The focus of that money is adjacent to Forest Service lands. This is the old Stevens Funds grant. These are $300,000 kind of max, large scale funding with no match requirement, which is particularly enticing, but also makes them very competitive. And then there's the landscape scale restoration program that's run with us in coordination with the Council of Western State Foresters. These also include a $300,000 cap with 50-50 match for rural working forest and cross-boundary projects. This highly competitive process is set to open today, I believe, and will close November 17th. The Western Forestry Leadership Coalition is set to host an informational webinar for applicants on this grant on September 13th, 2023 at 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and you can reach out to us for more information on that informational webinar for those grants. Only $600,000 can be funded across each state, and we are limited in the number of applications that we can put forward to 5. So there are some limitations, and it's a highly competitive process, but it's another one of those options out there. The other thing I wanted to just make sure you all are aware of is the new climate forward avoided wildfire emissions methodology. There's a huge social value associated with doing projects that confirm communities or companies or even states' ability to be carbon neutral. And there's a new methodology that looks at avoided wildfire emissions through forest treatment projects that mitigate wildfire. I was part of the team that helped develop this methodology, but after doing a bunch of modeling and calculations, what you're left with is a net carbon benefit to your forest treatment that result in a quantified and scientifically verifiable amount of carbon that you're protecting from going into the atmosphere through your project. These carbon credits can be traded on the California Carbon Exchange, sold in the European carbon market to offset your treatment costs, or can be used to help your community maintain or decrease its own carbon footprint. Some of this stuff is fairly new and not a whole lot of people are using it, but I just wanted to highlight it as one of those opportunities that can be used to fund projects as kind of an initiative as stuff is starting to pick up and move around. The last one I'll mention is that the Colorado State Forest Service recognizes that as much money is in the system and as much work that we do together as a community, as a group across the state, across all of the different entities that are doing this, we're never going to stop all of the fires. And when we do, and when our communities are impacted by fires, a strategy for replanting has to be a part of a three-legged stool that includes effective and safe fire suppression by putting some more trees back on the landscape. Mitigation is one of those other stools, but replanting afterwards is an important part of our stated goal of keeping Colorado's forests. The Colorado legislature and the governor has invested over $10.3 million into the Colorado State Forest Service Nursery. as we continue to move out to be a leader in the reforestation of some of our fire impacted landscapes. So that was a lot, and I know I went quick. I don't know how much time we have, but I'm happy to take questions if you have them, both offline or at that email or phone number that was currently on the screen, and I'll put that into chat here in a minute. I will say that I am currently hiring foresters in Gunnison, Frisco, Rifle, Granby, Levita, and Steamboat Springs. You can apply for any of those at that link right there. And I'll put my email address and phone number into chat.
Wait a minute, I thought we weren't competing